Hello, I'm Joshua Groisberg, a history enthusiast.
And I'm Jacob Friedman, founder of People's Big News.
And this is Gen Zers Talk Politics.
This is where two members of the next generation of American adults talk about what's going on in the world.
Since the whole world is on fire, we might as well take a crack at delivering some insightful analysis and maybe some comedy along the way.
So we have three topics. The first topic is the new Omicron variant that is circling around the world right now. Biden's policy to stop and how it connects to supply chain issues and inflation. We're also going to speak about the averted government shutdown and the debt limit that's yet to be raised. And we're also going to discuss the upcoming fate of Roe v. Wade in the Supreme Court. In terms of Omicron, as of this recording, there have been 5 confirmed cases in New York, and cases are beginning to pop up all over the country. And many countries have moved to restrict travel from certain parts of the world, especially from Southern Africa. Biden has done that for the US. He has also put in place new travel restrictions that require all inbound international travelers to get tested within a single day before arriving to the US. In terms of the supply chain issues, this is also going to make the supply chain issues worse. Although they have been getting a little better, the amount of containers stuck on docks for 9 days or more has declined by 41% since November, which is an improvement, but obviously we've got a long way to go. But I think supply chain issues get resolved a lot faster when people are back at work, when people are comfortable at going back at work. And we don't know a lot about this new variant, if it's more transmissible or not. We're still yet to see more data on it, but people are panicking. The stock market has certainly panicked. And if people are less comfortable like going to their jobs, then the supply chain issues will be harder to resolve than they were before.
I mean, you're right, Joshua. This is going to wreak havoc on the supply chains, but this was inevitable. The variants are inevitable. Considering the recent reports that it's not breaking the vaccines, most of the cases are unvaccinated, we're lucky. It doesn't look like we're going to have a complete shutdown. We're going to have a complete collapse like in March 2020, which is good. We can't have that again. Israel is locking down hard, at least, to everyone in the outside world. And other countries are doing this, and we can't do that. The only locking down I would really appreciate is what Germany's doing right now. Willfully unvaccinated people there, they can go to the grocery store, they can go to pharmacies, but they can't go to restaurants. They can't go to theaters. They can't go to non-essential businesses. Considering that a lot of this is caused by not getting the vaccines out in the world in time for all these variants to emerge, yeah, I'm for that. Look at Biden's specific plan about making vaccinated people quarantine after coming to the United States after they land. That was suggested, but apparently it's not happening now, which is good. We need vaccinated people to move and go a normal life. But right now there's no lockdowns. There's helping insurance coverage for testing, getting more of that because not enough tests. There's also extended mask mandate for public transportation, which is good. And there's also increased efforts for booster shots. That's good. We need prioritize boosting, prioritize vaccination, and keep some of the stuff we know works and get rid of some of the stuff we know that doesn't work. The only thing wrong with this plan is that there's no increased vaccine mandate. There's no real effort to expand on it, but it's probably because the courts are taking out the current, federal workforce mandate, and Biden probably doesn't want to, have that just be knocked down by the courts and go through a whole legal battle before, that case gets resolved. It's disappointing, but it's understandable.
I mean, obviously, I'm not an expert on infectious diseases. I mean, scientists obviously know way more than we do. But COVID-19 isn't going to go anytime soon. Even if we have complete universal human vaccination, COVID-19 is still spreading within animal population, where it can freely circulate and mutate even further, perhaps, requiring stronger modified vaccines that we might have to get, year by year. So I do think that, lockdowns are not an effective long-term strategy. And I do think we have to focus on vaccinating further and making sure that if you're vaccinated and you're eligible, you should get the booster shot because it'll protect you even better from this virus.
Right. It's inevitable. We need to get back to normal life as much as possible. And I give credit to Biden for at least trying to strike that balance. And we need to, spend what we know grows the economy. We need to get people back to work as much as possible. And, there's not much Biden can actually do on a lot of things like gas prices. There's not a lot he can do.
Well, he did tap into the oil reserves in an attempt
to, but looking at the whole oil trade, given a lot of this from the Middle East, from Russia, it is hard for the president alone to do something like that, account for those prices, as opposed to something like, manufactured goods here in the United States.
Yeah, and even with his measures, like I mentioned earlier, with the reserves, it's going to take a while to actually lower the price.
Okay, so second story is the Senate did something. Congress did something. Again, the last possible minute, Congress extended government funding for another 2 months. I'm telling you, we're going to have a whole song dance routine until February, and we're going to be back here in 2 weeks because the debt limit is fast approaching. And that's even worse than the government shutdown because it's the debt limit. Anyone remember 2010 or something, 2011, Boehner, Obama, and Tea Party? The government was about to default, which literally has never happened before. And you can't really do that without crashing the entire world economy, even more than the depression, because it's the U.S. economy, the age of globalization. And when you default, you kind of need to pay it all back. We're probably not going to default because it's just that risky. I don't think the Republican Party is as nihilistic economically as they are politically, but I don't know.
Well, I must say, even with this bill, it was quite the struggle. I mean, I believe in the House, only one Republican congressman voted for it, Adam Kinzinger of Illinois. And I believe it passed by a fairly large margin in the Senate, though. I think like 69-28 or something like that. You're right. I mean, we got to raise the debt limit because, like you mentioned, we're in a highly globalized world and the US economy is kind of at the center of it. I am glad that we provided funding, although it'll only be for 2 months. It's essentially kicking the can down the road. I mean, we're going to be back here again, fighting over it. And I believe a large part of the objection from Republicans was over Biden's federal vaccine mandates, which is just completely ridiculous.
It's nonsense. Rubio or something.
It is nonsense. And it's a nonsense reason to hold up something that, we need. We need government funding.
So third story, Roe v. Wade, abortion. If you listen all to the news, if you have any interest in politics or any interest in current events, you know what this is. The Supreme Court is deciding the Mississippi abortion law that heavily restricts abortion, and this case could possibly overturn Roe v. Wade and Planned Parenthood v. Casey, the two Supreme Court cases that legalized and modified the legality of abortion nationwide in the United States to varying degrees of actual windows and regulations, so forth, but it is legal to some degree in every state because of those two decisions. I'm not a woman. Joshua, you're not a woman. We don't, this is not something that personally affects us, but this is U.S. politics, important to talk about. And I just want to go over some facts right now. 60% of Americans want to keep Roe. That is a fact. That is from polling from everything from AP to Fox News. 70% plus, even with Republican majorities, in favor, for exceptions in cases of rape, incest, and endangerment to the mother's life. There is consensus on these things about abortion that we at least want the first trimester. We at least want, as a country, want exceptions for rape and incest and health endangerment that a lot of Texas law and Mississippi laws don't really have, or at least really, restrict. I mean, we could talk for ages about the actual court, about the Supreme Court, how we've gotten here. I mean, this is something that a good chunk of the religious right has wanted to do for a long time. This is democracy. You're able, they could announce the decision by the time you're listening to this, unlikely, but it's going to be a bloodbath. It's going to be to the level of we've never really seen before, at least not for the past 50 or so years, over this issue. I just have to say, this does not turn out the Democrats or the Democratic base or the anti-Republican voters for 2022. I don't know what to do anymore. If no one's willing to turn out for democracy, if no one's willing to actually, turn out for a side that's actually doing something with Build Back Better, infrastructure bill, and the other side, the Senate Republicans have literally chosen to not put out a policy platform for what they're going to do if they take back the Senate in the midterms. I mean, governing versus non-governing, a very, pro issue. Even near the consensus issue on abortion versus a little vigilantism and very heavily restricted, even banned. If that's not going to do it, I really don't know what to do anymore as to get people to understand that this is a crisis. This is not normal politics. This is chaos.
First off, to your point about turning out Democratic voters, even anti-Republican voters, I think, I don't think it's going to do it. I just don't think it's going to help with turnout because turnout is difficult to do, especially with midterms, because this, it's a phenomenon in American politics in general, right? If you elect the president of your party in an election, with the upcoming midterms, you have a problem with drawing out those voters to vote for Democratic allies again and again. I just don't think that even if the Supreme Court ends up completely overturning Roe v. Wade and kind of kicking it to the states to decide, different abortion laws and regulations, I just don't think it'll make people go to the polls, unfortunately, even though it's such a consequential issue that a lot of Americans, and there's just so much hypocrisy involved with how this entire issue is being viewed right now. I mean, let's remember that Greg Abbott of Texas has essentially severely limited abortion in his own state. I think we're going to see a lot more regulations like that if the Supreme Court refuses to uphold and protect Roe v. Wade.
There are good people on the other side than you and I on this issue. This is not saying that if you are pro-life or anti-abortion that you're a bad person. This is not demonizing. This is a political landscape that is fundamentally broken. 3 justices by a president who lost the popular vote, at least 2 of them under election years. Even beyond abortion to this issue, that really puts a whole powder keg on it. It's a real powder keg, multiple barrels, multiple matches being lit.
It kind of goes back to this this issue that we've had since the founding of the country, which is what is the role of the Supreme Court and how often should public opinion play a role in how the Supreme Court does its business, right? I mean, you're right. A large portion of the justices, Justice Alito, Justice Kavanaugh, Justice Barrett, Justice Gorsuch, Justice Roberts, the majority actually were appointed by presidents who at one point who lost the popular vote. Supreme Court, I think specifically, is made up of unelected officials to an extent because they technically should be, reading into the law and using their judicial knowledge rather than worrying about what the public is going to think. I do think that when people try to make this point about most of the justices being picked by, unpopular presidents, I think it kind of misses the point of what people think the Supreme Court should really be about.
At least for an election year, the whole thing with the Biden rule, I mean, that was hypocrisy, plain and simple. Garland not getting a nomination and then Barrett being confirmed in 8 days.
Oh, no, well, the process of confirming justices is a deeply partisan process. You're totally right. I'm talking about how they actually do business once they're on the bench.
I mean, yes, we should treat the Supreme Court with some kind of relevance, obviously. We should, justices should have some sort of good faith in them. We should have some sort of good faith. They are supposed to be about the law, but there comes a point where the process that confirmed them, the process that put them there, the process that guided them. I mean, some of the comments Amy Coney Barrett had about adoption being, a substitute for abortion. I mean, obviously, no, the court shouldn't always go with popular will. That's obviously shouldn't be the arbiter. But at some point, there's some kind of consensus, and that is so out of line that it seems comical. It seems the majority does strike down Roe and Casey with part of that line of logic behind it. It won't feel legitimate to have the country 60 and 70% of the country, 80% of the country, given the polling. I don't know. Something's fundamentally broken. And, I'm against court packing, adding justice to court, but term limits, long term limits, 20, 30-year term limits, something like that has to be considered. Like that Biden Commission, Supreme Court, they better come back with something. Just saying, something.
I suppose you got a point, right? I mean, I'm pretty sure this is the case for every single president, Obama, Trump, George W. Bush, whatever. But, obviously they have probably some political ideas in mind when they're actually going for the list to see who will I nominate to the Supreme Court. And then, especially more recently, Supreme Court nominees, it's become an extremely partisan process. Like you mentioned, Amy Coney Barrett and Merrick Garland not even getting one in the first place. But once they actually get on the court, I want to say that that's when the partisanship stops. But unfortunately, that's just not the case.
Listen to Alito. Remember when Alito had some speech and he was talking about Democrats? It was some speech he gave, and it was extremely bitter towards Democrats, towards the left, towards anyone who didn't support his confirmation, who doesn't support his view on the law. It doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel like he or some of the other justices are acting in good faith. And to say nothing of the fact that on this issue, part of the country views it as more of a women's rights issue instead of a life issue. And you look at 2 of the justices on the conservative side, both had sexual harassment or assault allegations against them. Powder keg. So I'm not saying right. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm not saying anything. It's a powder keg. Roberts can say, oh, there's no Obama judges or Trump judges, and he can go on about the court, independence of the court all he wants. But back in my mind, part of the reason why he's been siding with the liberal justices as of late, the past few years, is because he's thinking 5 steps ahead. Because he's thinking about the court right now is part of the powder keg.
Well, what about when Roberts essentially saved Obamacare, right?
Right.
Would that be an example of, would you consider that to be a lot like the current issue in front of the Supreme Court? Because Roberts voted with Obamacare because he worried the reputation of the Supreme Court would take such a huge hit that he actually voted to save it.
It could be entirely by the law. It could be entirely that something that people wanted to overturn it, have the right argument, or his view changed. It could be that. But I don't know. I mean, unfortunately, the court does not have the safeguard American trust.
Even looking at the future structure of the court. I mean, I'm not sure Biden will even have a chance to nominate his own justice. I mean,
Breyer to retire.
People should be screaming for him to retire. Legally, he's allowed to sit on the court as long as he likes.
Yeah, but he's gonna.
Politically, it'd be a better idea because if Biden nominates somebody young, they would stay on way long after he does.
So the point is that if he stays on, and it's like Ginsburg, and Biden loses or Harris loses, what the hell runs in 2024, and they lose, and it's DeSantis or Trump, they're gonna pick. And Breyer dies during 2024, 2028. He's gonna die, and they're gonna pick another Republican, conservative replacement. And it's gonna further tilt the court. And considering the track record we know about the Republican Party right now, it's gonna delegitimize the court further. I don't know. I mean, again, I don't want this conversation. No one wants this conversation. No one in good faith wants this conversation. The court should be independent. The court should be arbiter of justice, arbiter of constitutionality, but it's not. And we have to accept that fact, and we have to deal with it as it is. And right now, I'm thinking long-term limits. But then again, like I said before, I hope that the Senate, that the Congress, and Biden takes up that commission. And that concludes this episode of Gen Zers Talk Politics. Be sure to join our Discord server, follow us on Instagram at Gen Zers Talk Politics, and on Twitter at Gen Zers Talk Poly with an I, and add or email us to ask your burning questions.
Thanks for joining us, and we hope to see you next time.